I want to just explain that in every stage there are different needs, and that how well the needs are met in one stage makes a big difference to how fully each child moves through the subsequent stage, and so on and so on and so on. So if there's a lot of emotional wounding, for instance, in the second stage, our children struggle a little bit through subsequent stages. It's helpful to understand what those struggles are about because, as I said earlier, it's never too late for healing. It's never too late for healing. As I walk through these 7 stages of development, I invite you to consider not only your children, but yourself. It would be very, very useful for you, very fruitful, to be asking yourself as we go, how were my needs met at this stage? What needs were met really well by my family, my elders? And which of these needs were not met so well for me? How did that make me feel at that age? What are the possible effects for me long term? How does this help me to understand some of the anxieties that I might have, some of the struggles that I have in my life today? Because these foundational stages, unless there is healing to some of the wounds later on, they tend to have an impact that can stay with us for the rest of our lifespan. So let's look at the first stage. This is the prenatal and perinatal stage. It surprises a lot of people to discover that childhood development does not begin with birth, it begins earlier. It begins earlier at the latest by the 3rd trimester in the mother's womb. The emotional centers of the brain are quite mature. We're already able to feel so much, and not only we feel a lot of emotion and sensation, but by the 3rd trimester in the womb, we are already beginning to be changed by the way that we feel. And now, because we're so united with our mother's body through the umbilical cord, through the placenta, we're enveloped by our mother, we feel in tune with our mother. We feel what she feels. So the way that the world is treating both parents then goes straight through to the child when the child is yet to be born. So the first emotional need for the unborn child is for their parents to feel well supported, for the parents to feel protected from great shock and great stress, protected by their community, their family, their village. Well-nourished parents who are held, helps the baby to feel safe. So at this stage of our development, one of the key experiences is to feel wanted and to feel warmly and sensitively welcome into the world. Childbirth is very, very profoundly formative. At this stage, we are most sensitive to the environment. The way that we're touched, the way that we're held, the way that we're moved, the way that we're spoken to. We're exceedingly sensitive to conflict, noises, and even the stress of the people that surround us. So childbirth itself has a very strong impact. And it means that when there is a traumatic childbirth because of some medical intervention or other, It means that, even though perhaps that might have saved a life or saved both mother and baby from injury, and that there's a true need for the medical intervention, but we then need to address the psychological impact that has taken place on the baby, who probably went through deep, deep fear and confusion, perhaps even emotional shocks because of the interventions. It's very important for babies not to be separated from mother, to go straight to the mother's breast. Developmentally very, very important. Straight after birth. And there's so much research showing that skin to skin, direct skin to skin contact between baby and mother for as much as possible through the day, as much as possible through the night, is vitally important for the regulation of the newborn baby's nervous system. So safety, warmth, welcome. This is a time of life where the need to suckle at mum's breast is absolutely uppermost. Not only because of the physiological nourishment, but because of the contact that takes place. Newborn babies, their eyes don't focus very well, but they can focus at precisely the distance between mother's breast and mother's eyes. Evolution has made it so that eye contact can take place right from day one, even if just a little bit. And scans have shown that the brain of the child is being fed by the loving eye contact. This sets down the most foundational of emotional intelligences that remains embedded in the child's neurology for life. It stays with us for life. So baby needs calm and the immediate responsiveness to his or her needs, which are about holding, touch, peacefulness, eye contact, and being breastfed at the time of the baby's hunger, not by the clock. I will say a little bit more about that later on. When these needs and the first stage are addressed strongly enough, this is what gives us our strongest sense of being grounded, our ability to be present, to feel like we really deserve to be here. We were really wanted, cherished, and held. Our sensitivity was respected. It gives us our calmest, strongest resilience at the level of the nervous system, neural pathways, neurochemistry. And when there has been a lot of wounding at this stage, it tends to prime our nervous system towards a propensity to dissociate, to become withdrawn and detached. Here's why. This early in life, the fight or flight response is not available to the child. The only defensive response that they have is to become dissociated, to withdraw. It's a form of anesthesia, you could say. When there are a lot of shocks, traumas in this early life, and if those traumas are not afterwards addressed with holding, with breastfeeding, soothing, what happens is that then primes the nervous system for the long term to be too easily dissociated and withdrawn in response to life's stresses. And then the newborn moves into the baby stage, which is all about emotional security. The baby stage, very roughly, with a lot of overlap, the stages don't stop and start overnight. There's a big area of overlap between the stages. the first stage, or baby stage, is between birth to anywhere between the first year, first 18 months. And that's a time of life in which, when we have a need to be fed, to be held, to be made warm, to be cleaned perhaps, to be carried, to be rocked, to be soothed, to have company, to be played with a little bit. Right? A need for eye contact is very strong too. When those needs come up, we need those needs to be met promptly. The baby's brain is not equipped to wait. Babies don't have the neurological substance to prepare them for delayed gratifications, so that they become very quickly anxious, panicky, deeply distressed when their needs are not being responded. So it's very important during the baby stage that we hold our baby, that we pick up our baby when they're crying, preferably to be carrying our babies on our bodies for most of the day, because the baby's need to be held is almost unending. Now, there are a lot of cultures around the world that do this naturally and spontaneously. It's part of the custom. But modern attachment science has, and developmental neuroscience too, have very strongly confirmed the importance of prompt responding and carrying and holding our babies. Nighttime parenting is very, very important. Babies are just not prepared to sleep separate and alone. Nighttime is the most vulnerable time for a baby. They become distressed. Even when asleep, it's a more disturbed quality of sleep when they are away in a separate room. There's so much research into nighttime parenting. Human beings have evolved to sleep near one another, especially in the baby stage. Close enough, even if it's not in our own bed, but close enough that we can reach out with our hand to touch them, to soothe them if they wake up and cry a little bit. Close enough that they can be brought in for nighttime breastfeeding, which the majority of babies will need to and want to be at their mother's breast, often more than once, sometimes twice or three times in the space of one night. You can see how potentially tiring it is to have a baby, and that's why mums and dads need a lot of both emotional and practical support, especially when they have a little child at home. So really, I should say that one of the major things that babies need is to feel that their parents are being looked after well by extended family, community, or village. That when parents are tired, that there is another familiar attachment figure to hold that baby so that the parent can perhaps have a little nap or some kind of rest. The science behind breastfeeding is absolutely abundant. And what's recognized is not only that breast milk is utterly irreplaceable in terms of its immunological strengths that it brings to the baby's gut biology, the nutritional superiority of breast milk is unquestioned, but it's so much more than that. Breastfeeding brings very, very important psychological long-term benefit. I should say neuropsychological long-term benefit to the child. And years ago, they used to recommend to mothers to feed by the clock. It's now clearly understood that that is not optimal for a child at all. They become very distressed by having to wait to have their needs met. That can end up being traumatic for them. because the baby's brain is simply unable to predict or imagine a future. So that when mum doesn't come, they cannot tell themselves that mum will come soon. They just become very, very distressed, panicky, and sometimes just dissociated. But the strength that comes to a child, the resilience that comes to a child when these attachment needs have been met sufficiently, it makes them resilient to the stresses and even the traumas that life might bring many, many, many years later. There is possibly nothing so strengthening to the human being as to have the needs of babyhood met very strongly. It makes us far less prone to anxieties, depressions, anger, and it even helps us to focus, pay better attention, and to learn, to be able to concentrate and take in information in school years later. Typically when there is wounding at this stage, some of the things that can come up later in life as a neurological response to the wounding, to the anxiety that can arise, is addictions, particularly oral addictions like smoking, drinking, overeating, being very, very clingy and anxious in relationships, or going the other way, being avoidant of relationships, finding it very difficult to trust others. That's how we protect ourselves from loss, from grief. The third stage is a unique and brief stage between about 18 months and 2 years old. I call it the baby toddler transition stage, when children are half baby, half toddler. They're just learning to stand up, use the strength of their legs, and to be able for the first time in their life, and this feels revolutionary to a child, to mobilize, to move themselves under their own steam. This feels like a very, very powerful and exhilarating moment for a child, but they're also very vulnerable. They fall. They need us to back them, to hold them up, and not to expect too much from them. What they need in this critical phase of transition is support from us, but support on the child's terms. In other words, not having expectations of them, as many parents do around the world, to expect them to stand up sooner, to walk sooner, not to applaud or congratulate them for growing up quicker than what they're actually able to. They will take the time that they need to take. Okay, and when we expect too much from them, they try to please us, and in so doing, learn to ignore their own needs, learn to ignore their own vulnerabilities. They start to get shaped towards making us proud instead of just organically growing the strength of their own body. And that can have some long-term impacts. At this stage too, they need the space, the permission, and the support to express their big emotions. In early toddler years and throughout the toddler years, the child's brain is not mature enough to contain their biggest emotions, so their emotions can be quite explosive. I'll talk about that a little bit later on. They just need the permission and the space, even though, of course, sometimes as parents we get tired. It can be a little bit draining to be, or a lot draining, to be with our children's big emotions, their tantrums, for example, how they can sometimes cry for a very, very long time, and they just want us to hold them, to comfort them. This is demanding for parents. So yes, they're standing up and they're starting to walk, but they still have the needs of the baby to be held, to be comforted, to receive our warmth, our touch. What's beginning to happen though at roughly 18 months is that children are beginning to become able to imagine the future. Just at the early stages of understanding that if you don't come straight away, you might be just around the corner and you'll come soon. They start to develop the very early stages of resilience to delayed gratification. They might protest, but they're not quite as vulnerable as, say, a 6-month-old baby. So when their needs for support at this stage are essentially met, this can give the child a lifetime of balance and self-respect, a sense of humility. They grow with a stronger, grounded sense of, I'm not just here to please other people, I'm here to be myself, to be true to myself. When children are pushed too hard at this stage, sometimes that they adapt by becoming grandiose, becoming narcissistic. Look how good I am, look how great I am. And the compulsive need to be dominant in relationships. Wounding at this stage will start to make alterations to a child's manner of relating to other people. This is how they protect their emotional vulnerability.